They laughed behind my back, then to my face. I was the MS of the family, the aimless one, the one who never quite made it. But the day a US senator turned to me and asked, "You're the mayor," was the day everything changed. Hi. I'm Dana Whitmore. I'm 34, a small-town mayor, a community builder, and, once upon a time, the family disappointment. I used to dread family reunions, not because of awkward conversations, but because I knew I'd be the cautionary tale. Funny how life spins when you lean into your purpose quietly and let results speak loud. And if you think this story is about revenge, it's not. It's about realization that my sister, Rachel, was always the star. Class valedictorian, Ivy League grad, landed a job with a senator straight out of law school. My parents would beam with pride just hearing her name. Me? I went to a state college, then dropped out in my final year to work full-time at a nonprofit. My dad said it was emotional impulsiveness. My mom called it immature idealism. They didn't say those words at once, but over the years, inside eyes and sighs and Thanksgiving whispers, what they never saw was why I left the time I was volunteering with a community center in a neglected part of town. We provided groceries, helped renters understand their rights, and translated forms for immigrants. It felt like I was finally doing something real. I didn't want to leave those people behind to chase a piece of paper, so I stayed. And worked. And learned, but to my family, it was a sign I'd given up. At every gathering, I'd hear some version of "Swell, Rachel's flying to DC next week. Dana, you still in that little office downtown?" Yes, I was. And I was watching that little office grow. In 4 years, we expanded the community center into a coalition, one that influenced city policy. We got sidewalks installed in overlooked neighborhoods, started a job training program, and opened a youth center in an abandoned library. But my family didn't see headlines or fancy titles, so they didn't think it mattered to them. Success. Wore suits, carried briefcases, and networked in boardrooms, not boots, carried clipboards, and knocked on doors in the rain. Still, I kept going. Because someone had to. The turning point came when our mayor abruptly resigned over a corruption scandal. It rocked the city. People were angry, disillusioned, and worst of all, apathetic. That's when a few local leaders approached me. "You're already doing the mayor's job," one of them said. "You just don't have the title." At first, I laughed. Me? Mayor. But then I remembered all the mothers who called me directly when the lights went out on their street. All the kids who recognized me in grocery stores. I remembered why I started, and I filed the paperwork. When I told my family, the reaction was underwhelming. Rachel said, "Wow, that's ambitious of you." My mother blinked. "Mayor of what again?" My dad chuckled. "You do know that's a real job, right?" Still, I campaigned with a used car and a megaphone, with donated signs and potluck fundraisers. While the other candidates paid consultants, I met voters at food banks and laundromats. I didn't have money, but I had trust. People knew I showed up when no one else did. Election night felt like a dream. I won, by a landslide. I became the first woman, and youngest person, ever elected mayor in our town. But I didn't throw a big celebration. No champagne, no parade. I went home, made tea, and texted the youth center staff, "This win is yours too." The next family gathering was awkward. My parents congratulated me like someone would compliment a toddler's macaroni art. "That's nice, Dana." But it didn't matter. I hadn't run to impress them. I'd run because my community needed someone to fight for it. Fast forward to last spring. My sister was now senior counsel to a US senator. She invited us to a fundraising gala in the city. Normally, I would have passed, but this time I thought, why not? Maybe I'd finally be seen. I wore a simple black suit, hair pulled back, name tag just reading, Mayor Dana Whitmore. The room was buzzing with power suits, handshakes, and forced laughs. I stuck close to the side, unsure where I fit in. Then it happened. Rachel came over with the senator beside her. He was tall, well-spoken, every bit the polished politician. "This is my sister, Dana," she said casually. The senator extended his hand and read my name tag. He froze for half a second. "You're the mayor," he said, eyebrows lifting, and I nodded, unsure if he was surprised or impressed. His face broke into a genuine smile. "I've heard about the youth jobs program in your city." "That's you?" "We discussed your model at our last infrastructure committee." Rachel blinked. My mother, standing behind us, turned pink, and I finally felt seen. The senator and I talked for 10 minutes. Not small talk, policy, logistics, long-term goals. He asked questions like I was a peer. I answered like I'd been preparing for this moment my whole life. When he walked away, Rachel looked at me like I just shape-shifted. "You never told me your program went national." I smiled. "You never asked." That gala changed everything, not just how others saw me, but how I saw myself. Back home, I was greeted by local reporters wanting to hear more about the national attention. My inbox filled with collaboration requests from mayors in other towns, even a few international groups. The same community work they once mocked was now being modeled elsewhere. Rachel called the next week. I didn't give you enough credit. Her voice was different, quieter, more careful. Adana. I've been thinking. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic or tearful, but it was real, and that was enough for me. Sometimes, we get so used to being dismissed that we forget what respect feels like, but when it finally arrives, not from shouting, but from showing, it's powerful. I didn't need to prove anything to Rachel or my parents anymore. Their recognition didn't make me mayor, my actions did, and even more than the title, it was the trust of my people that mattered. A few months later, my city was hit with a record-breaking flood. Streets submerged, homes damaged, schools shut down. The first night, I was out with emergency crews, organizing shelter drop-offs, calming panicked families. In the chaos, someone tapped my shoulder. It was a young mother, ankle-deep in water. Holding her toddler, she looked me in the eye and said, "I knew you'd be here." I swallowed hard. That one sentence meant more than any headline, because being mayor wasn't about the gala or the recognition. It was this. Rachel visited a few weeks later. She volunteered at the food pantry, helped with cleanup, and sat in on a city meeting. Afterward, she said, "I didn't realize how much goes into what you do." I just smiled. Most people don't. We took a walk through the park I helped redesign. Families were playing again, the sound of laughter returning after weeks of stress. Rachel turned to me and said, "You really changed this place." "No," I replied. "We did. Together." Because even if they came late to the party, I didn't want to hold on to resentment. I just wanted to keep building. Now, 2 years into my term, we've launched 3 new public housing projects, introduced a citywide tutoring program, and created 150 new jobs through our green initiative. I still get dismissed sometimes, especially in state meetings by men twice my age who think I'm someone's assistant, but I just shake hands, smile, and pull out the stats. Eventually, they stop talking down, because I don't need to argue anymore. I just showed it to anyone out there who's ever been the failure in the family. Hear me, your value doesn't lie in their approval, that it's in the lives you touch, the work you do, the way you show up when no one's watching. They may not understand your purpose until it's staring them in the face. Shaking hands with a senator, but that's not your job to wait for. Your job is to lead, even if you start at the bottom of the invitation list. Sometimes, the path looks different than you thought. Less applause, more sweat. Less spotlight, more streetlights. But trust me, it's worth it, because one day, someone will turn to you, eyebrows raised, and ask, "You're the mayor?" And you'll smile, not to prove them wrong, but to affirm what you already knew. You always had it in you. They just weren't looking in the right direction. A few months after that walk in the park with Rachel, our city received a federal grant, one we'd applied for over a year ago. It was meant to develop sustainable community infrastructure, solar grids, flood-resistant housing, and walkable green zones. I remember staring at the approval letter, the zeros at the bottom, the word awarded. I didn't cheer. I didn't jump up and down. I just sat still for a moment and let it sink in. Everything we'd built, every ignored phone call, every door slammed in our faces, every time someone said, "That's cute, but unrealistic," it all led here. And yet, the real reward was never in the grants or the headlines. The real reward was watching kids ride their bikes on streets that used to be cracked and forgotten. It was hearing a teenager say, "I didn't think college was for me, but maybe now I will." It was an elderly couple sitting under solar-lit benches we'd installed, whispering, "It feels safer now." These moments didn't make national news, but they made our news. They reminded me that quiet work changes loud lives, and still, my family didn't entirely get it. They saw progress, yes. My mother even started printing out online articles and leaving them on the dining table like she'd always believed in me. My dad, well, he became strangely obsessed with finding typos in press releases, but they didn't always see the weight of leadership. The nights I couldn't sleep after voting on a zoning change that displaced 5 families, even though it meant shelter for 50 others. The criticism from both sides: when you're not radical enough for some and too radical for others. Leadership is lonely, but it doesn't have to be silent. So I started mentoring, not interns in offices, but young women in the community, activists, artists, kids who'd been told they'd never make it. One of them, Maria, reminded me of myself. Big heart, no filter, full of fire. She wanted to start a youth climate collective, but was scared people wouldn't take her seriously. I told her the truth: they won't. At first. But show up anyway. She did. 2 years later, she spoke at a climate summit in front of 3,000 people, and afterward, she called me in tears. He asked me if I was the founder, she said. He didn't expect me. I just smiled that that's the best kind of power. The next election approached faster than I expected. People started asking if I'd run again. Others said I should consider statewide office. Even Rachel hinted there might be an opening soon in the governor's circle. But I wasn't chasing a ladder. I was protecting a community. I sat down with my team in City Hall, a group of 8 wildly different, brilliant, gritty leaders who had stood beside me when no one else did, and I asked them what still needs fixing. And oh, the list we made up. That's when I knew, I'm not done here yet. The night I announced my re-election bid, the old gym we booked was packed wall to wall. Kids in Red Cross vests, teachers, elders in wheelchairs, families holding signs that said Whitmore Works. Rachel stood in the front row. She wasn't just clapping. She was cheering. After the speech, she came up to me, hugged me tight, and whispered, "I get it now. I really do." We both teared up. Because it took years, but the girl they once called a failure had become something no one could ignore. Not even family. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't vindication. It was simply this. I'd finally built something so real, so necessary, so rooted, that it didn't matter who didn't believe in me at the beginning. I believed in them. In this town. In the people who never got second chances. I was never here to make headlines. I was here to make change. And I think that's what I want to leave you with. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you the most, don't let that define you. If your journey looks messy or quiet or slower than others, don't let them rush you, because sometimes the ones called failures are the ones planting the deepest roots, and one day, you'll be standing in a room you were never invited to, and someone will say, "Wait, you're the mayor?" And you'll smile, not for them, but for you, because you knew it all along. After the campaign rally, I stayed behind in the empty gym. The folding chairs were half stacked. The lights dimmed low, and there was a faint echo of laughter and footsteps from the volunteers heading out. I stood in the middle of it all, still in my boots, still in the same suit I wore when I was first elected, and all I could think was, how did this life grow from the girl they once pitied? But I knew the answer. It wasn't a miracle. It was consistency. Community. Showing up when no one else would. Still, something inside me whispered, what now? As my second term began, the city started receiving national attention for our urban renewal model, restoration over replacement, resident-led redevelopment, equitable infrastructure. A journalist from The Atlantic called it the Whitmore way. That made me laugh. I didn't invent any of it. I just listened, but I realized something important. People weren't just watching me anymore. They were watching the method. Other cities wanted to learn. Schools wanted to teach it. Foundations wanted to fund it, and I was no longer just a mayor. I was becoming a blueprint. That fall, I was invited to speak at a national leadership conference in Chicago. As I walked backstage, I saw rows of names on the program, senators, CEOs, thought leaders, and then there was mine, Mayor Dana Whitmore, Whitmore Model for Grassroots Governance. I took the stage, heart pounding but steady. I didn't talk about theory. I told them about Gloria, the retired teacher who spent her pension to build a community garden. About Zay, the high schooler who fixed our Wi-Fi routers during the pandemic so his neighbors could work and learn, because that was leadership. After the speech, a woman approached me. She introduced herself as a policy analyst from a major think tank. "You don't sound like a politician," she said. "Thank you." I smiled. "No," she said seriously. "I mean that as a compliment. You sound like someone people would follow." Her words sat with me all night. Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to climb any higher in politics, but I did want to keep lifting others. Could I do that without a title? Could I do it on a bigger scale? The thought scared me, but also excited me. Back home, I began assembling something new, not a campaign, not a coalition, not a legacy. We founded the Whitmore Institute, a nonprofit designed to train and support future local leaders, especially women, BIPOC, and those from underserved communities. Our first cohort included a barista, a single dad, a second-gen immigrant nurse, a formerly incarcerated youth advocate. They didn't have fancy resumes, but they had roots. They had vision. They had stories. Watching them step into their power lit something in me I didn't even know I was still missing. One night, sitting on the steps of City Hall long after the council meeting ended, I called Rachel. "I think I'm ready." I said. "For what?" she asked. "To let go of being the one they doubted." She was quiet for a beat. "You never were that person, Dana. We just didn't know who you really were." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was building forward. That winter, a snowy Friday afternoon, my father showed up at my office unannounced. He'd never done that before. He held a box in his arms. Inside were newspaper clippings, articles, a photo of me shaking hands with the senator at the gala. He didn't say much. Just sat down across from me, looked me in the eye, and said, "You turned out more than fine." That was his version of an apology, and for the first time in my life, I felt like his daughter and his equal. I still walk through the neighborhoods that shaped me. People don't always recognize me right away. Sometimes they just call out, "Hey, Mayor," as if I'm still that girl who used to carry water bottles and voter forms down dusty sidewalks. And in a way, I am. Titles come and go. Elections are temporary, but the people, the parks, the streetlights I helped install that keep teenagers safe on their walk home, they remain, and long after my second term ends, I'll still be here, because this was never about winning. It was always about belonging. So when the senator visited again last month for a federal infrastructure review, we shook hands like old colleagues. He introduced me to his staff as one of the most innovative public servants I know. Rachel stood beside me. She didn't interrupt. She didn't correct him, she just looked proud. And after the briefing, she hugged me and whispered, "You didn't just change this city. You changed me." I never imagined those words would mean so much, but they did. To anyone reading this who's been overlooked, misjudged, or mocked, let them talk, let them laugh, then let them watch as you bloom quietly, relentlessly, and without permission. You don't have to shout to be heard, you don't need applause to make impact, you don't even need the people who doubted you to cheer, because one day, someone in power will turn to you in awe and ask, "You're the mayor?" And your answer will say, "Everything I was. But more importantly, I was here."